Truth and Transcendence, episode 181. Beyond Wounded Toward Wisdom. That's the name of a workshop I attended recently as a participant. It was fantastic. It was run and designed and run by my friend Julie Parker, who has been on the show before and who I believe I've mentioned before. Julie introduced me to the Pellower energy technique and has done a phenomenal job of establishing Pellower in the UK. Massive mission that she took on. And she's now created this superb workshop, Beyond Wounded Toward Wisdom. And I think a bit like my own Freedom of Spirit and a lot of other workshops around the world, what makes this one stand out is that the design of it and the experience of it and the way that it's run could only be done and accomplished by Julie. Because what it does, it takes participants through a journey that approximates to the journey that Julie has gone through in her life in terms of her own learning and in terms of her own integration and sense making and cross-connecting between different modalities and approaches to come up with a piece of wisdom that is very, very potent and very, very exciting. So I'm not going to try and describe the workshop particularly, because hopefully I will manage to get Julie back on the show to talk about it, probably in 2025, because it really is wonderful and I want to support it. And I want to help spread the word about this particular thing. But I would like to share a few lessons I took from it, which I think are relevant to any of us, actually. So the first one of these is in exploring early life wounding, which there's many different ways to do that, from psychoanalysis right up to ayahuasca. You know, you can explore your early wounding in multiple different ways. I think the lesson I got on this workshop in that regard was that the early wounds in life are not necessarily a bad thing. And one's degree of early wounds is nothing to do with our virtue today or our personal power or any of those things. The idea being that the wounds that we have from early in life don't make us a victim, but they do hold within them wisdom. And this idea that the wounds that we've experienced or the traumas we've experienced earlier in our lives are actually utterly appropriate to the learning and the growth that we are here to do. And that learning and growth is there for us to do because of our purpose for being here at this time, in whichever body we're in on this planet. So if we look at it from that point of view, and instead of seeing it as, poor me, I've had a trauma, I've got these wounds, therefore I'm a victim, I'm less than, or I'm more pathetic than, or weaker than, or less powerful than someone who doesn't have those wounds and traumas, instead saying, what if I actually looked at that situation and looked at those things as grist for the mill of my empowerment and my sovereignty? Now, I know this is not a new idea, but thinking about it as an idea is nothing like the same as engaging with it in practice. So obviously we did do that on this particular workshop, but again, there are other ways of doing that. There are ways of doing that through workshops, retreats, working with your coach, your therapist, however you want to do it. It's very, very useful to look at one's past traumas or woundings and say, what's the wisdom within those? What is happening in my life now as a result of those? What can I learn from that now? And how can I respond to that now in my life? And notice in the way I'm saying that, we're not going back in history to analyze the wounding, and we're not trying to fix the wounding or make the wounding go away. Instead, we're saying, let's see the wounding as a signpost to something in the present moment. So that's a very, very interesting inquiry and a very interesting thing to look into. And I highly recommend spending a bit of time reflecting on that, maybe meditating on that question, what if whatever traumas I've experienced or whatever woundings I'm carrying within me, or whatever woundings my family may be collectively carrying, or my community or any other collective, what if those woundings and traumas contain within them really empowering and vitally valuable and useful wisdom for me? And then the next piece that I really learned on this weekend was this idea of, in addition to having this perspective on our wounds and our traumas, in addition to that, recognizing that we are already divine, that we are already perfect, we are already pure light. So this is not the Christian approach of original sin, that, you are essentially sinful unless you fix yourself or unless you sanctify yourself. This is a point of view which suggests that you are automatically and naturally divine. You are pure spirit. And that if you work from that place and progress forward from there in terms of getting more connected to that, allowing yourself to express that more deeply, undertaking forms of study that help to refine that and become more familiar with it, and to evolve with it and to expand with it, that's a very, very powerful way also to be in the present moment and to be in a generative state. And that this process, this dynamic, is also very, very healing on our wounds. And it actually takes you to a place where you're in touch with your inherent wisdom, or at least some of it, and you're in touch with the possibility of a generative path, which allows you to become more and more aware of wisdom that is already within you and to receive wisdom from outside you as well. But without that taking over, without that becoming more, having greater authority than your own wisdom. But your own wisdom is what has the authority for you. And another lesson on this particular workshop was the lesson of holding it all very, very lightly. This idea that if in exploring ideas or practices, it starts to feel heavy or onerous or burdensome, isn't there always the possibility of lightening up? And that lightening up allows us to come closer to what you might call a state of play, an open, almost childlike faculty and capacity for exploring and for possibility and for imagination. So this idea of pausing in our endeavors around our growth and our expansion, pausing when necessary to create some space, to allow lightness to come back in. And if it's becoming heavy, allowing ourselves to breathe, relax, let go of the heaviness and come back to the lightness. So these were really wonderful experiences and learnings. And I'm only a week off from doing this workshop now as I record this. There's a workbook came with it, and there's all sorts of other further study that can be followed just from having done this one workshop. So I really recommend looking into those different things I've just spoken about, what I've shared about. And also the thing I know for sure, as I progress with this over the next weeks and months, I will receive more insights and more expansion and learning. And I think also another reason why it was particularly valuable for me is because it was looking at these things from a very fresh perspective, not the same perspective as the one that I hold personally. So that doesn't mean there was a conflict, but it does mean there were a few points where I found it difficult to understand what was being suggested, because I had a part of me saying, no, I would describe it differently. I would say it differently. And so I actually paused at those moments and said, can you explain that again? And then I could reach a point where I could understand that different perspective. And it did not contradict my own. It added another perspective. So that helped me with my expansion. So it's great as well to go and do things and have experiences that are different from what we would have thought of ourselves, that take a different angle on it. Because what that does is it actually increases our capacity for learning and understanding and expansion. So overall, a very optimistic experience. I'm going to put something in the show notes about Beyond Wounded Toward Wisdom. It's going to be open to the public from next year. Up to now, or up to the end of 2024, it's only been available for Pellower practitioners and teachers. But from next year, it'll be available to the public. And there may even be a possibility of me persuading Julie to run one of these workshops in my living room, now that I've road tested it for a workshop with Hugh Wilborn a few weeks ago, which, by the way, was fantastic. If you haven't yet clued into Hugh Wilborn and his book, The Bug in Our Thinking and the Way to Fix It, please do connect in with that. So thank you for listening. Have a great week, and I will see you next time.